She had told me the party was for her coworker's promotion, someone I'd never met but apparently owed the courtesy of my presence. I didn't argue. Lately, disagreeing with her felt like tossing a pebble at a freight train, pointless and likely to end with me being run over. So I nodded, put on the blazer she hated but I liked, and followed her out the door like a shadow. The venue was one of those modern spaces that looked expensive but hollow, like a showroom no one really lived in. Too much white, too much glass, and music that sounded like it was designed not to offend anyone. She drifted away from me within minutes, swallowed by a crowd of people who greeted her like she was some kind of minor celebrity. I stood there, hands in pockets, watching her glide across the room. Her laugh rang out, and for a second, I thought it was genuine. Then I realized it wasn't the laugh that bothered me. It was how she never looked back. I found a seat by the window, pretending to care about the skyline. Someone offered me champagne. I declined. I needed to be sober for whatever this night was turning into. Around me, the party blurred into a stream of background noise. She reappeared now and then, dropping a word here, a glance there, just enough to keep up appearances. But something in her was disconnected, not cold, detached, like I was a contract she'd already broken but hadn't filed the paperwork for. The moment the tension crystallized was subtle. I overheard her name from a group of men across the room. They were laughing, one of them mimicking her voice in a way that made my spine stiffen. Then another leaned in, said something I couldn't quite catch, and they all burst out laughing again. When they noticed me watching, their amusement died abruptly. One of them cleared his throat, said something about getting another drink, and they scattered like guilty children. I stood. I didn't make a scene. Not yet. But I followed the trail. She was out on the balcony, back turned, standing too close to a man I didn't recognize. Tall, polished, with the kind of confidence that didn't need to raise its voice. They weren't touching, not physically, but the air between them was heavy, charged. She laughed, too loudly, and then did something she hadn't done in months. She looked alive, and when her eyes met mine, her expression didn't change. Not a flicker of guilt.
No επάλεγει. No surprise.
Just mild inconvenience, as if I'd shown up at the wrong dinner reservation. The man excused himself smoothly, giving me a nod that felt more like a dismissal. She watched him go, then finally turned to me. "You followed me out here," she said flatly. "You disappeared," I replied. "I'm not required to report to you," she said, arms folding. I wanted to ask her what was happening. I wanted to understand when exactly she'd stopped loving me. But what came out was something entirely different. "Do you even like me?" Her response wasn't immediate. She looked past me, into the city, as if weighing whether I deserved the truth or just another lie. "I don't think I ever did," she said eventually. "But you were convenient." I nodded slowly, as if absorbing a diagnosis. Something incurable. She moved to go past me, but I didn't step aside. "And him?" I asked, not raising my voice. She smirked, but there was no joy in it. "That depends on how tonight goes." And then she walked away just like that, like I was a bookmark in a novel she'd long since stopped reading. I stood there a long time after she left, listening to the laughter and music inside. I wasn't sad. Not yet. I wasn't even angry, but something had shifted. Quietly, permanently. I walked back inside, but not toward her. Not anymore. I didn't leave the party. Not right away. Instead, I watched her from across the room. How easily she rejoined the crowd. How quickly she slipped back into that glittering mask she wore so well. I noticed the man from the balcony return to her side. He said something low in her ear and she tilted her head back, laughing like he just whispered the secret to immortality. A few others joined them. 2 women, another man, and they all laughed together, as if they'd rehearsed it. Then I saw it. The exact moment she leaned into him, fingers brushing his shoulder with a familiarity she'd stopped offering me months ago. The tilt of her hip, the way she angled her body to block the rest of the room while keeping her smile public. It was subtle but deliberate. That wasn't a coincidence. That wasn't impulsive. That was choreography. I don't know how long I stood there before someone approached me. A woman I didn't know, slightly drunk, asked if I was all right. I smiled politely, nodded, said I was fine. She hesitated, then murmured something unexpected. "She does this at every party." My head turned. She looked away quickly, regretting the words, but it was too late. I stepped closer, quiet. What do you mean? I didn't say anything, she muttered, clutching her glass like a life raft. Forget it. But I couldn't. It had been happening before tonight. Of course it had. I wasn't just being discarded. I had been replaced a long time ago. This night wasn't the betrayal. It was the reveal. I made my way through the room, calm on the surface, a furnace beneath. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to fall apart. Not here. She was near the exit now, one hand on that man's arm, guiding him like a trophy she'd just claimed. He was smiling, confident, ignorant. I walked up to them, straight, steady. Excuse me, I said. She turned with the kind of sigh people reserve for delays at the airport. What now? She asked. Her friends quieted, sensing the shift. The man beside her looked at me, confused. You forgot your husband, I said. The group exchanged glances. She didn't flinch. Oh, come on, she said, exasperated. Are we really doing this here? I didn't look at the others, just her. I want you to say it. She crossed her arms. Say what? That this is who you are now. That you lied. That you manipulated me. That you've been walking around like I'm some kind of unpaid assistant while you flirt your way through your networking events. You're embarrassing yourself, she said coldly. Then she laughed. Laughed. In front of your friends? I asked, voice even. Are they the audience for this little theater? That's when she leaned in, low and venom-sweet, and whispered, You were always the warm-up act. He's the headliner. Something inside me didn't break. Clarified. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw it. Not the woman I fell in love with. Not the woman I thought I could fix things with. Just a performer who had overstayed her applause. I stepped back, nodded, then turned to the man beside her. You'll be next, I said. She's not loyal, just bored. And with that, I left. I didn't storm out. I didn't slam the door. I just walked, past the doorman, past the valet, into the night air that finally felt real. My phone buzzed. 13 missed calls. From her. But I didn't answer. Because tonight, I wasn't the one who was humiliated that I didn't go home. The apartment felt contaminated, like it held the residue of her lies in the walls, in the furniture, in the sheets she used to complain were too rough. So I walked. No destination, no plan, just the city breathing around me, louder than usual, like it too knew something had ended. I wound up at a 24-hour diner, the kind of place where no one asked questions because everyone was hiding from something. I took a corner booth, ordered black coffee, and stared at the empty seat across from me. I had so many questions. But the one that stuck in my mind wasn't why did she do it? It was, why didn't I stop it? Not the affair. The slow erosion of us. The moments I ignored, excused, rationalized. The way she came home smelling of perfume that wasn't hers. The sudden interest in phone privacy. The spontaneous trips with the girls that never had photos, never had stories, just silence. But I didn't want conflict. I wanted peace. I wanted the idea of her more than I wanted the truth of her. And that's on me. I must have sat there for hours. The waitress came by a few times, refilled my cup without a word. Around 3 a.m., I checked my phone. The 13 missed calls were still there, and now a flood of texts. Most were short, cold. You're overreacting. I didn't even do anything. Grow up. Then one that made me pause. You'll regret this when you calm down. That's when I realized she still didn't understand. She thought this was about jealousy, about being seen, about ego. But it wasn't. This wasn't rage. It was grief. I opened our shared calendar app, something we'd barely used, mostly reminders to pick up groceries or dentist appointments. I deleted everything, every note, every plan, every event we'd marked together. Felt symbolic, like scrubbing a whiteboard clean after a failed strategy session. Then, on impulse, I wrote her one message. Just one. I'm not angry. I'm done. I hit send, turned off my phone, and for the first time in what felt like years, I exhaled without the weight of her on my chest. But peace wouldn't come that easy. When I finally got home around dawn, I found her waiting outside the door.
No makeup. No smile.
just a tight-lipped version of herself that looked almost unsure. "You blocked me?" she asked. "No," I said, brushing past her to unlock the door. "I just didn't want to hear excuses." She followed me in like she still lived there. Maybe she thought the world would reset if she just stepped inside. "I didn't sleep with him," she blurted out. I said nothing. She stepped closer. "Are you listening?" I said I didn't. "I heard you. I only flirted. Okay? You think that's betrayal?" I turned to her, tired. "You humiliated me. Publicly. Repeatedly. You dragged me into a room full of strangers and acted like I was a mistake." Her eyes narrowed. "You're twisting it. I was just having fun." "No," I said. "You were performing cruelty. And you enjoyed it." The silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't tension. It was finality. She picked up a few things. Her keys, her bag, a jacket, and stood in the doorway for a beat. "I don't want to be the villain," she said. "You don't get to choose," I replied. She left.
No επάλεγει. No closure.
Just a door that closed softer than it should have. And behind it, the sound of nothing. The first morning without her felt louder than I expected. Not because she had ever been particularly warm in the mornings. She wasn't. Her presence had always felt more like a frost than a flame. But absence has its own sound. A different kind of noise. The silence of someone who isn't coming back. I didn't look for her toothbrush. I didn't check if she'd left any of her clothes in the closet. I already knew the answer. She took only what she needed. No trace of her perfume in the bathroom. No pair of heels abandoned in the hallway. Just enough to make it look like she'd never lived here at all. I sat at the kitchen table staring at 2 coffee mugs. Both empty. And then, in an act I didn't plan but couldn't stop, I took hers and dropped it in the trash. That was the first piece of her I discarded. Then came the second, an email. I logged into our shared streaming account. Noticed she was still watching those trashy reality shows she used to mock. It made sense now. Nothing about her was ever honest. Not even her tastes. I changed the password. That night she messaged me. Not to apologize. Not to check on me. But to demand the new password. "Are you serious? This is childish. Grow up."
No emotion. No shame.
Just a thread of entitlement that stretched back years. I didn't respond. She called again. I let it ring. Then, a voicemail. "You don't get to rewrite history just because you're emotional. I never cheated. I flirted. Get over it. You knew what this was. You always knew." That's what she believed. That I knew. That I was somehow complicit in her detachment. That because I didn't leave sooner, I must have accepted the terms. She was wrong. I wasn't in denial. I was in love. There's a difference. I saw the warning signs, yes, but I believed she could change. I believed we could. But she had been writing a different story. And the worst part? I'd read it like it was ours. So I stopped listening to her voicemails. Stopped reading her texts. I didn't block her. Blocking would suggest I still cared. I just deleted each message without opening it. It was like watching someone try to knock on a door that no longer existed. She tried a new tactic. Mutual friends began reaching out. Her campaign had begun. "She's devastated. She says you misunderstood everything. She didn't mean to hurt you." But none of them said she was sorry. Because she hadn't said it. Not once. And that's when I knew I had crossed a line she didn't think I'd dare to approach. I wasn't broken. I was waking up. And in that strange, hollow space where pain should have lived, something else was taking shape. Not revenge. Not hatred. Something colder. Cleaner. Clarity.it started with a knock at the door. Not pounding. Not desperate. Just a polite little rhythm that sounded almost casual. As if whoever was on the other side had a right to be there. I opened it to find her standing there, holding a paper bag and wearing an expression that didn't match the past week. Neutral. Pitched somewhere between peace offering and manipulation. She didn't wait for an invitation. "I brought your favorite," she said, brushing past me into the apartment like it was still hers. "That noodle place you like." I didn't respond. I watched her move like nothing had happened, placing the bag on the kitchen counter, unpacking containers like we were in some parallel life where she hadn't torn mine apart in front of witnesses. "You can't just show up here. I thought we could talk." I leaned against the wall. "About what?" She blinked, almost surprised by my tone. About us. There is no us. Her hands froze mid-motion. You're not even willing to hear me out? No, I said. Not anymore. She finally looked at me, really looked, and for the first time, something in her expression cracked. Just slightly. Not remorse, not pain, but confusion, like she'd expected to find me waiting, heart in hand, ready to negotiate my self-worth for a second chance. I was angry that night, she began. You were being difficult, distant. I laughed once, dry and sharp. So you humiliated me in public? That's your defense. You humiliated yourself, she snapped, sulking in the corner like a child. That whole dramatic exit. Pathetic. I walked past her, opened the door. You need to leave. She didn't move. You think you're so noble now, she said, arms crossed. But you're not. You're just trying to punish me for not being what you wanted. I turned slowly. I didn't want perfection. I wanted honesty. I wanted loyalty. I wanted to be seen. You couldn't give me that because you were too busy auditioning for the next better thing. Her eyes flared. You always thought you were smarter than everyone else. No, I said, stepping closer, voice even. I just finally realized I'm smarter than this. She stared at me, trying to recalibrate her tactics. But whatever game she was playing, the pieces had shifted. I wasn't on the board anymore. She picked up the bag of food, now cold and untouched. You'll be lonely, she said, quiet. Better than being lied to by someone who confuses cruelty with confidence. She left without another word. And this time I didn't watch her go. I closed the door, locked it, and turned back toward the apartment. It was still quiet, still half empty, but something was different now. Not the space. Me. I wasn't holding on to her anymore. I was holding on to me. It was a Wednesday afternoon when the silence finally stopped feeling like punishment. Not that it had become peace yet, but there was no longer an echo of her footsteps in the hallway. No ghost sitting on the couch with crossed legs and sharpened words. The apartment wasn't a memory anymore. It was just a place I lived in. And for the first time, I could breathe all the way in without running into a wall made of what-ifs. I started doing small things that had no place in our old life. I rearranged the furniture, not out of necessity, but because I could. I got rid of the ugly glass vase she loved, the one she swore, tied the whole room together, but never once filled with flowers. I found the dusty old record player in the back of the closet and brought it to life again, letting music echo through the apartment that didn't have to compete with her voice anymore. But clarity doesn't protect you from consequences. That weekend, I ran into one of her friends at the grocery store, the kind of mutual acquaintance who always spoke with a hint of judgment, like everything you did was part of a personal court case. She smiled too much, too quickly. I heard what happened. I didn't say anything, just nodded and reached for a jar on the shelf. She's really not doing well, the woman said, lowering her voice like we were exchanging state secrets. You blindsided her. I turned to her finally. Did she tell you what she said to me? At the party? The smile faltered. No. Let me help. She told me I was pathetic. Said she never liked me. That I should be honored she wasted her time on me. That was after parading another man around like a prize while I stood there like furniture. She opened her mouth, but I didn't let her speak. And now she's hurting? Good. Maybe next time she'll remember that even shadows leave when the sun moves on. I walked away before she could form a comeback. That night my phone buzzed again. This time it was a long message. Longer than anything she'd sent since the split. There was no apology, of course not, but it was dressed in emotional costumes. I didn't mean to make you feel that way. You always took everything so seriously. I thought you were stronger. It was her specialty. Rewiring the narrative so that her cruelty became a misunderstanding, and my pain became an overreaction. She wanted to reframe the breakup not as the logical result of her betrayal, but as some tragic miscommunication where both parties shared the blame equally. But that's not how it happened. I didn't reply. I didn't give her the satisfaction of one more performance. I just archived the message, like a museum piece from a failed exhibit. And later that night, something strange happened. I laughed. Not a bitter laugh. Not an exhausted one. A real one. Because for the first time since the party, I realized I wasn't healing from love. I was recovering from neglect. And that process, while brutal, was also the first thing in months that felt entirely my own. Was raining the day I saw her again. Not metaphorically, not dramatically, just rain in the most ordinary way. The kind that soaks your cuffs and makes the city smell like old concrete and cheap cologne. I hadn't planned it. I was coming out of a bookstore, clutching a secondhand biography I didn't really need but liked the look of, when I caught the flash of her through the crowd. She was at the corner, under a red umbrella, talking to someone. Not him. A different man. New model, same shine. She didn't see me. Not right away. She was laughing, but not the theatrical laugh I remembered from the party. This one was sharper, louder. It was forced in a way that only people who are desperately trying to look fine can manage. She touched the man's arm when she laughed. I recognized the move, and I saw something else too. She wasn't glowing. She wasn't radiant. She looked tired. Not physically, emotionally. Her eyes moved around like someone expecting to be watched, or maybe hoping to be. Then she saw me, and the world tilted. Her smile faltered. Her body stiffened. I stopped walking, not out of shock or pain, but curiosity. Like watching a scene from a movie I'd already seen the ending to. She didn't wave. She didn't approach. Just stood there, blinking, umbrella trembling slightly from the wind, or maybe something else. The man beside her glanced between us, sensing something he didn't understand. She said something to him quickly, and they turned the corner. Gone. I stood there for a moment, the book getting wet in my hand, and realized something I hadn't quite accepted until then. She wasn't the villain of my story anymore. She wasn't the central figure. She wasn't the wound. She was just someone I used to know, and that terrified her. Later that night, my phone lit up again. A short message. Did you see me? I stared at it. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I finally had no desire to say anything. I left it unread. Not out of spite. Out of indifference. And when I looked around my apartment, my life, my silence, I realized I liked what I saw. Not because it was perfect. Not because it was easy. But because it was mine. Her absence wasn't a hole anymore. It was space. And space, I was learning, is the first breath of freedom. 2 weeks passed. No messages. No calls. No accidental run-ins. And I started to believe it was over, not just logistically, but cosmically. The weight of her had finally dissolved from my atmosphere. I could walk into rooms without wondering if she'd once been there, touch memories without bruising. Then came the letter. Not digital. A real letter. Handwritten, sealed, even scented faintly like something floral and familiar. Probably the same perfume she used to wear when she wanted to manipulate a mood. No return address. Just my name. I stood there holding it for longer than I should have, debating whether reading it would reopen something I had worked so hard to close. But I opened it. Not because I needed closure, I'd earned that myself, but because I wanted to see if she was still trying to twist the knife or finally realized she'd lost the game. Her handwriting hadn't changed. Still sharp, angular, too neat to be natural. It started with a tone I recognized. Performative vulnerability. I know you hate me. A lie. She knew I didn't. She wished I did because hatred is still an emotional tie. Hate is a mirror of love. Indifference is an empty wall. She rambled through half a page of reflections. How she was misunderstood. How she was coping. How things had spiraled beyond her control. She claimed she had been trying to feel something real at the party and got carried away. She said I'd never understand what it was like being with someone who expected so much. That made me laugh, because I hadn't expected much. Just decency. Just truth. Just not being betrayed in a room full of people clapping for my humiliation. Toward the end of the letter, the tone shifted. Her true voice emerged. Not the one she wore for sympathy, but the one built on pride and fear. I still don't think I did anything that terrible. You overreacted. But I do miss you. There it was. The real sentence. The raw nerve. She didn't miss me. She missed the version of me that stood quietly while she performed. She missed the safety net. The invisible applause. The backstage crew that made her spotlight feel legitimate. I folded the letter once, cleanly, and slid it back into the envelope. Then I burned it. Not out of anger. Not as a symbolic act. Just because it didn't deserve to take up space in the place I was building now. The next morning, I did something unexpected. I texted an old friend. Someone I hadn't seen in years. someone she never liked. She used to call him a waste of time because he was too blunt, too honest, too unwilling to play along with her performance. We met that evening, talked for hours, about everything, about nothing. At one point, he asked, "Do you still think about her?" I thought for a moment. "Only when I realize how quiet it is now," I said, "and how good that quiet feels." He nodded, didn't push further, just raised his glass. And for the first time in months I raised mine too. Not to forget. To begin, I didn't plan to return to the restaurant. Not because it held some deep emotional scar, but because it was a monument to that exact moment when the illusion shattered. The place where she'd stood in front of her friends, laughed in my face, and said those words. Ugly, pathetic, loser. Like she was reading them off a teleprompter she'd rehearsed 100 times. But sometimes fate loops back around when you least expect it. An old colleague invited me to dinner. I said yes before checking the location. When I saw the name, my stomach didn't drop. It didn't even shift. That surprised me more than anything. So I went. Not to test myself. Not for revenge. Just to eat. Same place. Same lighting. Same overpriced wine list. But nothing about it felt threatening now. It was just another building with polished floors and chairs that looked comfortable but weren't. Halfway through the meal, my colleague stepped away to take a call. And that's when I saw her. Not a vision. Not a ghost. Her. Across the room. Alone.
No entourage. No laughter.
No new man glued to her side. Just her. Sitting with a half-empty glass of wine and a phone she wasn't touching. She looked up, and our eyes met. She looked smaller now. Not physically, but that glow she used to wear like armor was gone. There was no curtain to hide behind. No stage lights. Just raw, stripped-down silence in her gaze. And in that silence, something shifted between us, not closeness. Not apology. Recognition. Of who we had become. I didn't look away, and I didn't smile. She rose from her table and walked toward me. Slowly. Like she wasn't entirely sure what she'd say until she was already saying it. "Can we talk?" she asked, quiet. I didn't answer right away. I looked at her. Really looked. And all I saw was a person. Not my wife. Not my tormentor. Just someone standing in the ruins of choices she never thought would catch up with her. "Talk about what?" I finally said. Her voice wavered. "I made a mistake." "No," I said. "You made a series of choices. Don't insult both of us by calling it a mistake." She blinked. Not crying. Just exposed. For the first time, maybe in years. "I thought you were weak," she whispered. "Back then. At the restaurant." I nodded slowly. "I know. But now. You think I'm strong." She looked down. "Now I think I was the weak one." And there it was. Not an apology. But an admission. She didn't ask for another chance. She didn't beg. She didn't try to reframe anything this time. And that, oddly, was the closest she'd ever come to honesty. "I hope you're okay," she said, and turned to walk away. I watched her go, her shoulders not quite as straight, her steps not quite as confident. Then my colleague returned, oblivious to the moment that had just passed. "You all right?" he asked. I nodded. Never better. And I meant it. Not because I was healed. Not because I had all the answers. But because I no longer needed anything from her. Not clarity. Not closure. Not even revenge. It didn't end with fireworks. Or confessions. Or a cinematic speech under the rain. It ended in silence. The kind that doesn't ache. The kind that simply is quiet, whole, settled. I didn't hear from her again after that last night at the restaurant. Not a call. Not a message. Not a curious "how have you been?" laced in guilt. She vanished the same way she had always appeared, on her terms. But this time I didn't chase after her. Instead, life unfolded. Not perfectly. Not with sudden joy or miracles. Just honestly. I started reading again. Books I had abandoned because she said they were too heavy or pointless. I reconnected with people I hadn't spoken to in years because she'd made them feel unwelcome, inferior, inconvenient. I traveled short trips at first. A city I once loved. A quiet cabin by a lake. Places that didn't need explanation or permission. I saw reflections of the man I used to be. The man before her. Before I allowed myself to shrink into the shape she preferred. And it hit me one evening, watching the sunset from a rooftop cafe in a town where no one knew my name. She hadn't stolen my happiness. I had handed it over, little by little, compromise by compromise, until I was living in a version of myself that barely fit. A version that waited for scraps of approval, that confused silence for peace and survival for love. But not anymore. Now, when people ask if I'm okay, I don't pause before answering. I don't replay the party, or the restaurant, or the smirk on her face when she told me I should be honored she even wasted her time. I just say, yes, I'm good, because I am. Not better because she's gone. Better because I finally remembered who I am without her. And if someone reading this finds themselves standing at that same emotional cliff, staring into the abyss of betrayal, humiliation, abandonment, here's what I'll say. You don't need revenge. You don't need closure. You don't need them to explain why they shattered you. You only need one thing, to remember that you are still whole, even if someone convinced you otherwise, especially then.